Hi everyone, this is just a quick video taking you through question 5 for paper 2. Now this video is actually a following on from my last two videos which were looking at the other side of paper 2. So section A, specifically we looked at question 1 and question 2 in the first video. The second one looked at 3 and 4. Now this one is going to look at question 5 and this is going to be based on a similar theme as well. So all those videos work together because we look at the same exam paper as well. So now we're going to break it down, question 5, which again is going to be really important because it's worth 40 marks just for this single question. Now if we have a look at a typical exam question, I just wanted to have a think about the kind of things you might need to write about and then try and attempt the challenges on the next part. So the question says then, learning from home has been beneficial for a lot of people. It has helped people to stay safe during COVID and all teaching should now be online. Write an article for your school magazine where you discuss this issue. So whenever you're faced with a question like this, you should think about, first of all, identifying the TAP of the exam question. Now, when we talk about the TAP, we mean the topic, the audience, and the purpose of the question. So now if we think about it in a bit more detail and try to break it down a bit, the topic is about teaching online. So even though you have quite a long-winded idea here, it's really important that you actually break down and specifically think about what the main area of the topic is. And then the subcategory of the topic is about people staying safe and the benefits that come with teaching online. The audience, it's not necessarily going to be very directly stated in the question, and you can see here in this one it isn't either, but the only way that we know that it's actually meant for a younger audience is because it is for a school magazine. Now of course there will be other people, not just the students reading it, but the vast majority of people reading a school magazine are going to be teenagers. When it says the purpose then, all you need to do is think about discussing your point of view. So it's a really interesting thing to think about because this is also going to allow you to give a balanced argument should you choose to do that. Super challenge. So recall the acronym used to respond for this question. And the final one, think broadly about this question and come up with ideas for and against the topic. So if we think about the super challenge first of all then, the acronym that you might use in order to actually help with your article writing would be something like deforest. You can also use go massive as well, and maybe you use that quite successfully in paper 1, which would be fantastic. But largely you want to think about what kind of persuasive techniques can you use, and the majority of those are going to come from the deforest or afforest acronym, depending on which version your teachers use. When we're thinking about the actual points to make about this one, remember you don't have to be completely married to these initial ideas. That is why it's a really good idea just to get a plan sorted out first of all, because it gets a little bit of an opportunity just to flush out some of the good ideas, some of the bad ideas, and then you can really think about which ones you want to focus on in your writing. Class feedback. So can you come up with more ideas than the teacher? Now, we don't know what question is going to come up in the exam, but we definitely know it's going to be an article of some kind. So because we don't really know specifically what it's going to focus on, you need to be able to develop that skill to just come up with an idea really quickly. They don't have to be great ideas straight away, but just being able to think things through really quickly and to come up with your own view and your own ideas about that topic will be really beneficial. So here are a few that I came up with based on the question that we just went through. So I have both reasons for and reasons against. Now the reason why I'm thinking about both of these as well is because it helps me to actually understand, where does my viewpoint lie. It might be that you haven't had much time to really consider the question, so this is a good way to plan out your ideas to see what side of the fence you might sit on. So reasons for them. So students will be safer, there'll be less risk of catching COVID, and of course you can talk about other things that will keep them safe as well, like not having to travel long distances, horrible things happening like getting mugged or robbed on the street or anything like that is obviously very limited if they're doing all their teaching from home. Learning in a comfortable environment, so you don't have to be in one of those horrible plastic chairs in a really stuffy uniform. You can be at home wearing the clothes that makes you feel comfortable, and therefore we could argue you could learn in a much better environment. You won't have to get up as early. Now this is a good one as well, because it not only actually impacts the students, which is great if they get a little bit of a lie-in, but also it means that your teacher will be that much more refreshed as well, and probably be able to mean that they can have that much more energy and that much more enthusiasm when it comes time to teach you. More time with family. Again, our family is extremely important, and if we're not always racing out the door, coming back quite late, and things like that, it means we're at least around the people that we love and care about the most. And improve independence. Now, I'm sure many of you would agree that when we did go into a lockdown and we did all have to learn online, the ownership was very much put on the students. You had to be the one logging on, you had to make sure that you had all the right equipment, and you had to make sure that you met the deadlines that were set by the teacher. So let's have a look at the reasons against them. So less engagement in lessons. So if we're all honest, during the lockdown, when people were doing learning online, a lot of people were doing simple things like muting their microphone and not really paying attention to the lesson. They might have been doing something else instead, like playing on their Xbox or something. Digital poverty. Now this is actually a really important issue. It's one that people are still affected by a lot today. And many people don't really appreciate how bad it is, but there are many families who don't even have internet access or the use of a computer, or even if they do, many of them have to share that computer with 2 or 3 other siblings in their household as well, so it can be very difficult for them to learn online. Lack of social skills and interaction. This is something that's massively important, specifically for young people and for teenagers. You need to learn the skills of how to interact with people your own age and learn the kind of social skills that will really benefit you later on in life. So if we don't actually have the opportunity to develop those skills, then it's going to be very detrimental in the long run. May cause issues with mental health. So again, being locked indoors day after day, staring at a computer screen, generally isn't good for anybody, so we have to think about the wider impact of teaching online as well. Now these are just a couple of ideas that I've came up with off the top of my head. It might be that you've came up with even better ideas, which is great, but what you should do when you're planning your response is think about having 3 to maybe 4 strong ideas that you could write about, and that will form the main body of your article. Now, this is something that one learner was asking me about recently, and it's, can you present a balanced argument in your writing? So, in terms of presenting a balanced argument, yes, you can. This can help you appear more mature and show a deeper understanding of the issue you're actually discussing. If you only tell your side of the story, it makes you seem like you're very narrow-minded. It makes it seem like you only care about your side of the view and that you're not considering other people's feelings and their viewpoints on this issue. Saying that as well, you can always appear to be balanced. So a way to do this is you can discuss the other side of the argument to appear balanced. We can do this to acknowledge the other side and then present a better argument which counters any arguments that might be in the reader's mind. So you might say, for example, I understand that you might enjoy having lessons online. However, think about how boring, terrible, and infuriating that's going to be day after day, week after week. So when we do that, we think about acknowledging one side of the argument, and then we make sure that we come up with a stronger, better structured response to make sure that no one can argue with our point of view. Now, if you're still unsure about how you can kind of put this into actual words, we're going to have a look at a quick example now. So here we have our example then. It says, many people believe that learning from home is beneficial. It is true that many learners prefer to learn this way. However, are they really learning? A recent study found that 90% of learners felt bored, disengaged, and unmotivated when sat in front of the computer all day. Sure, being at home is nice, but who really benefits? Now, if we think about the teacher's top tip then, just before we move on, I want you to think about this then. So you can balance your paragraphs with different viewpoints, but make sure you are consistent with your ideas in your introduction. So if you've put in your introduction that you mainly think that we shouldn't go online, then that needs to be reflected in the rest of your article. So if you think you're doing 3 main paragraphs, you could do something like have one saying that we shouldn't go online, one saying that we should, and then the other one saying that we shouldn't. And in terms of the ratio there, we're just making sure that our overall opinion that we justified at the start is actually carried out throughout the rest of the writing as well. Another good way to really improve your response is by using an anecdote. So this is a technique that isn't normally included in the DeForest technique acronym. However, it's a really good one to use if you can use it appropriately. So first of all then, what is an anecdote? So an anecdote is a short, amusing or interesting story about a real incident or person. So it doesn't really matter if this is true or not. An anecdote is a really good tool to use to actually get across an idea that you've actually experienced what it is you're talking about, and you can lend some of that personal experience to try and persuade someone towards your point of view. Now, a typical example would look something like this. So last year, a lot of people loved it when we were doing our lessons online. It was funny to just sit there and mute my microphone while the teacher prattled on about something or other. Teaching online was great. I got so good at Call of Duty. Now, I didn't mean this one in a completely serious tone. However, it is a good idea to sometimes use a funny or an amusing anecdote in order to actually justify my point of view. And for me, this one actually works really well to point out why we shouldn't potentially go online for all of our lessons. So sometimes we can actually say it's a personal experience that's happened to ourselves. It could be an anecdote that could have been my experience, or I could just say in my writing, one student said this about learning online, and then give the quotation there. And that is a really good way to say, look, this is actually some factual information, or at least something that appears to be factual towards the common goal that I'm trying to achieve within my writing. So I'd like you to think about, when you are thinking about an anecdote, what effects might this actually have on the audience, and will it actually help you to achieve the overall effects that you want your writing to have? Write in your response. Use the success criteria to begin your writing. So here again we have the same question that we looked at a few minutes ago. So learning from home has been beneficial for a lot of people. It has helped people to stay safe during COVID, and all teaching should now be done online. Write an article for your school magazine where you discuss this issue. So in order to get a decent mark, you need to be thinking about these kind of things to help actually make sure that you're hitting the criteria that the examiner is looking out for. So in your response, you should write in a clear and a concise manner, and this means that you're keeping to 1 point per paragraph, and that you're not merging a lot of ideas, and you're not just getting a load of ideas down in a mad frenzy. So 1 point per paragraph. If you think that you've explained that point well enough, then that is the time to move on to your next paragraph. Use a range of language techniques. So the acronym DeForest is really helpful. It's a really good thing to just make sure that you're using some of the really good techniques in your writing. However, there are other things that you can use. You can use an anecdote that we looked at a moment ago. You can also use any you go massive techniques, or anything really there that can help justify your point of view. Vary your sentence structure for effect. Now this is something that's often neglected by a lot of people, and all it means really is that you've got to think about the pace of your writing. And the pace of our writing really changes in terms of the length of our sentences. You don't want people to get into this constant rhythm where all the lines are the same length. That's going to give it a very boring, dry, monotonous tone, and it's not really going to have the impact. Sometimes when you're really excited and energized about something, you speak in really long, complex sentences, and often when we're angry or we want to really emphasize a point, we can use nice, simple, short sentences to get our point across. Use a range of punctuation accurately. So if you're only using things like full stops and commas, you have to understand that that is typically the kind of things that will be used by someone who is in Key Stage 3. So we're talking about anyone in, let's say, Year 7 or Year 8 would know how to use a full stop and a comma. In order to get a higher mark, you need to make sure that you're using colons, semicolons, parentheses, all those other kind of more advanced forms of punctuation. And if you're not too sure what we mean by that, do check out our other videos where we've gone into that in more detail. And finally, write in the form of an article. Now this year we're very beneficial because it's the only year really where we've been told we're absolutely 100% going to be writing in some form of an article. So for an article you just need to make sure that you're definitely using a title and subtitles as well. Now this is actually a really good thing and a helpful thing to use as well because it allows us to break up our writing as well. Again, if you need to refer back to this, please do so. If you want to send any responses to me, please leave a comment below and I'll try and get back to you with an email address, and I'll try and mark it before the exam date as well. If you're still a little bit unsure, what we're going to look at now is a typical example you could use just to get you started and just to get you thinking about how to construct your own question 5. Look at the example below and use it as a starting point for your own response. So here we have a student example, and once we've read through it, I want you to think about maybe you don't actually agree with what this student is saying. That's absolutely fine. What you can do then is use this response to try and get you thinking about what you can write about yourself and try to write the counter argument to go with this idea. So what would be the other side of the argument? So it says then, learning at home is fun, enjoyable, and helps learners to succeed. Who would want to be stuck in a stinking, smelly classroom all day when you get to be at home instead? Let me get straight to the point. We should have all lessons online from now on and never go back to the dusty, dreary classroom again. Now, you might not necessarily agree with what the student is saying, but that's absolutely fine. The important thing to think about here is really the techniques that are being used. Now, there are a few techniques here that would definitely get it off to a good start. The first one is a triplet. So that's one of our DeForest techniques. It's actually the T at the end of the acronym. So learning at home is fun. That's one. Enjoyable and helps learners to succeed. So there you go. That's 3 strong ideas towards a common goal. An appropriate triplet has been used, and that will help the candidate to get a few marks straight off the bat. Who would want to be stuck in a stinking, smelly classroom all day when you get to be at home instead? And we've got kind of the effect of some sibilants there. And if you're not too sure what I mean by that, I'm talking about the use of the S. So you've got stuck, you've got stinking, and you've got smelly. All very kind of negative adjectives there to describe the situation. Nice little repetition, nice bit of sibilants there with the S's. We've also got a rhetorical question. It brings me to another point, an important thing to remember, that even if you're writing quite a long sentence, like we've got here, who would want to be stuck in a stinking, smelly classroom all day when you get to be at home instead? You have to remember that if you're starting it with something like who, what, where, or anything like that, then it must end with a question mark because you're clearly asking a question. A lot of people make the silly mistake of forgetting to put the correct punctuation at the end there, so just make sure that you do that as well. Let me get straight to the point, and this has been followed by the use of a colon. Colons are traditionally something that people often struggle to use. A colon's a really good thing to use to indicate a list, and even though the person's just going to list the one thing they're going to prove in their writing, that's absolutely fine. So it'd still get a mark there for using that advanced form of punctuation. We should have all lessons online from now on and never go back to the dusty, dreary classroom again. So you've got alliteration there to end this little example of dusty and dreary. And this actually works as a really good introduction as well. It might be that you don't necessarily agree with this one, which is absolutely great. What you could do to get yourself started, or for just a little bit of practice around your question 5, is to use this and try and write your own introduction using some similar phrases or some words, or even just the same use of punctuation there, to write your own response and see if you can write an introduction at a similar caliber to that response there. If you need any additional support or help, then new videos will be added every single week. Alternatively, as I said before, leave us a comment if you're really unsure about anything, or if you're having a little bit of nerves or jitters before the exam. I'll try and mark anything that you want to send over to me and try and give you the best feedback possible. You can also visit our partner channel, Bookworm Teaching, for more lessons and guidance on all things English. Thanks ever so much for watching, guys, and please do get in touch if you need any help and support. All the best with all your revision in the future, and I hope everything goes well with the exam. Thank you.